Inverter I've been reading about on the DIY solar power forums. I've got this inverter. It's an off-grid inverter. It's about $300 Chinese. I got it to run the fish pond from solar panels. It's got a 240 volt pump and it draws about half a kilowatt an hour, and I was just going to put this inverter in a box on the back of the fish pond, a couple of solar panels to run the pump. But I read on the forums that some guys are hooking these up to their EV to get 240 volts. At the moment, a 240 volt inverter from an EV battery is a couple of $1,000. So I've got this hooked up. Blue and white wire goes to the battery, 12 volt battery, just temporarily hooked up there to see if it works. I've got this input hooked up to the EV battery. Now typically this would be the solar panel input, but the inverter doesn't know the difference between an EV battery and a solar panel array. And here's 240 volts in if you want to charge the battery from the grid or run the fish pond from the grid, which would be in my case if there's no solar. And 240 volts out. I've got it going to this power board and a 240 volt saw. So it's hooked up to 12 volts at the moment, and the inverter needs 12 volts to fire up. So I'll start the inverter up and hopefully it'll turn on. It was already on. Okay, so it's running off the 12 volt battery. We'll look at the screen. It's got 230 volts coming out. It's a pure sine inverter, but that won't run the saw. And it trips the inverter off. So I'll turn the inverter off, turn it on. If you had a big beefy battery, this is only the 12 volt model. If you had a big beefy battery, you might run the saw. You can get a 24 volt model and a 48 volt model, but I wanted a 12 volt model to experiment on the car. And I'm only going to have a 12 volt battery at the fish pond. Now if I turn the car on, I'll just check. There's 100% isolation. That was one of my criteria, to make sure that it didn't trip the BMS from an isolation hazard. I don't know what the beeps are, but now it's 230 volts cranking out, and it says the solar panels are generating electricity and they're charging the battery. So now I'll crank up this saw. Put a bit of wood on it and give it a bit of a load. I better put my foot on there. There you go. 240 volts from a DIY EV battery. It's 140 volts going in. The inverter thinks it's the solar panel feeding in. So $300 to do the same job as a $3,000 V2P or V2H inverter. Pretty happy with that. It's only 1200 watts, but does the job.